So when we think about the geopolitics around the world and what are some of the issues and impacts around that, there's often, when we look across all of the research, people talk about the impacts of climate, the impacts of conflict, and the impacts of economic shocks. And so we've seen a lot of this in the recent years. We've seen increased conflicts happening around the world, some of them in our news and some of them being spoken about, some of them behind the scenes happening in different parts of the world, not getting the attention they need to resolve. But whenever conflict happens, it has major impacts. It increases the ability for agriculture to occur. It disrupts the movement of food in and out of different areas. And it also creates tension, particularly in societies which rely on the land, where you see scarcity of grazing land, for example. You're seeing issues where herders are getting into conflict with one another. And climate then impacts and accelerates that. So we're seeing often in some of the areas where there is climate impacts, there is also conflict starting to occur. And then economic shocks. So as we've seen happen, when economic shocks come, when price volatility happens, we see food issues. And so that can come for a variety of reasons. It can be because of political changes and shifts. It can be because of protectionism and borders and policies around that. But it also can be through other shocks we saw with COVID and many of the impacts that COVID had that really impacted the price of food in different parts of the world. And when prices shift, it changes the amount people can buy, it changes the diversity of food they can buy, and so that's a big impact. The challenges that we're facing are too big to do alone. We need countries and cities are part of the globe. And so we need to look at bringing together action in a coordinated way. Just solving climate change in one part of the world, particularly say in Europe, isn't going to fix the world's climate. It's very important. And I think we need to be looking at those kinds of solutions, but we need to do that also in a way that helps keep the furthest behind and supports them to also meet those needs. When we look at the impacts of things like climate, we see that those furthest behind often had the least to do with causing the crisis that we're in. And yet they're being asked to jump ahead and try and solve it. And so we have to look at equity. A mentor of mine talked about the world being a little bit like a global waterbed. You know those waterbeds you would push here and it pops out here. When you push down somewhere and you shift something or put pressure, it pops up somewhere else. And I think we've got to think of it that way. So we have to have integrated alliances, coalitions coming together to address and drive forward these solutions. And that's difficult. It's difficult when there's internal pressure, when politics is putting pressure on local solutions. But I think those local solutions have to be thought of in that global context. So being first time at ftalks, I think I've really been taken by the conversation, the dialogue that's looking at solutions from innovation, but looking at how they pull through to the bigger issues we face. And I think it's very practical. There's a mix between the kind of theoretical, what is the situation, what is the area, and why do we need to change, with the practical, here are solutions, here are ideas which are actually trying to solve problems and out in the world and being tested and learned from. So I think it's ftalks is the coming together of change makers to drive forward change, focused on and sharpened by the latest information, the global conversation, the dialogue, but then focused on how do we actually make that practical and get that into action.